When you're on death row, that's when the clock really starts ticking. He just said, I'm gonna do my best, and yes, he saved my life.
I was like, I'm not gonna make it through this. I can't do 25 years in prison.
The people that we've represented have been the most desperate, the most despised, unfortunately, and the poorest and powerless people in the country.
Stephen Bright is a lawyer, but for his clients, he is their last hope.
Catherine Julia Harlow.
I met him the day that I walked into his class at Yale Law School.
Thanks to them and thanks to their work, both in Atlanta and here, there's one less person facing execution in Georgia today.
Listening to him talk is like listening to justice.
He's a force of nature, and he has dedicated his entire life, really, to fighting for equal justice.
If we don't do better, we're going to have to sandblast equal justice under law off the Supreme Court building.
He's really driven by this deep belief that he has an obligation to be a voice for the voiceless, to stand up when everyone else stays seated. What does the Southern Center for Human Rights stand for?
Represent people facing the death penalty and represent people in prisons and jails with regard to unconstitutional conditions and practices. I wanted to go where the problems were and where I could be helpful.
He has argued 4 capital punishment cases before the Supreme Court, and he won them all.
You've often said people are always much more than the worst thing that they've ever done.
Of course. Tony Amadeo is a perfect example.
I get up in the morning, make me a cup of coffee. I think about my blessings, what brought me here.
Tony Amadeo served 38 years in prison for his involvement in 2 murders.
I'm responsible for their grief, my family's grief. I'm deeply, deeply sorry.
How close was Tony Amadeo to being put to death?
Well, it came pretty close. We basically threw sort of a Hail Mary pass by asking the Supreme Court to take the case.
He won in a unanimous decision.
The evidence discloses an intentional program of rigging the jury by the prosecutor's office.
Why do you represent people that you know have committed murder?
Everyone has to be represented if the legal system's going to work.
If you talk about a champion for change, you're talking about somebody that makes an individual commitment for the betterment of other people. I'm getting emotional.
I certainly wouldn't have been the kind of lawyer I became without his model.
Civil rights attorney Brian Stevenson started working with Bright right out of law school. He would go on to found the Equal Justice Initiative.
In a lot of ways, it does become like ministry. I think you can't actually appreciate the burdens of the condemned, of the poor, of the marginalized, if you haven't tried to carry some of those burdens.
You have to let your heart be broken.
Yes, that's right. Steve made it safe to love the people you represent.
Like Shauna Shackelford, who was falsely charged with burning down her home. What happened in 2009?
My house burned down. I ended up getting blamed. We lose everything, end up homeless, and I was charged with first-degree arson. They offered me 25 years at first.
25 years in prison?
Yes. And then
for a fire you didn't set?
Right.
And then you wrote a letter to someone.
I received a letter just 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God, I have not seen this letter in forever. I've lost my job. I've lost my home. I've lost my dogs. I now sleep in my car.
I'm tired and I'm beaten and I don't understand how to fight this. It's been days now since I've eaten.
So Bright took on her case for free. What happened to the charges?
They were dropped.
Dropped because he'd done a few weeks of investigation.
And it was determined that it was actually an electrical fire.
How long has it been since you saw him?
About a decade now.
What would you say to him if you got to see him?
Thank you for saving my life.
We thought it'd be nice if you could tell him yourself.
Because of his teaching and influence, he's doing more than most people to make sure that that legacy is carried on by new generations of lawyers and advocates. But nothing's ever quite as good as the original.